And I remember somebody showed me this at some point, and the day they showed me it, I went, but wait, those notes have to be everywhere. And I methodically figured out, you know,
yeah.
And I figured out it all the way up until it repeated, and I went, and it repeats, you know. Everything that I play on this guitar with Gillian is designed to make a sound with Gillian.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's all completely, it doesn't have any, it bears no relation to how I would play this guitar, or, like, for that matter, how I would sing with someone else. It's all sort of designed towards that end. And so my little cross-picky things that I do, or the way, like, there's a really funny thing that happens all the time where if I play a low fifth under what she's playing, we get the note below it. You know, you get that, it sounds like there's a low root. There's just all that stuff going on at all times. The top of I'll Fly Away?
Yeah.
I mean, I would play something like that. I mean, it's really simple, but it's just... I mean, some of my favorite stuff with this, up that high, was like on the... So nice.
Yeah.
There's some stuff on the second record where Gil's playing banjo that I choke up. It's a tune called One Morning.
Right.
And I love the way this guitar sounds up there. It just holds together in a crazy way.
Yeah.
It's so... It goes so straight. I mean, I know that I've always liked... Like, even when I was listening to, like, some of those old bluegrass records or something, when they'd sing, like, an open interval and there'd be, like, a 9 in there, when that stuff would get hit, it always sort of tweaked. I always liked it. You know, I always liked those sounds. And I found it really funny that, like, the first couple times I was messing around on an organ, like, a couple of things that Gil and I recorded, the version of Hickory Wind at one point, where I was playing organ, and my fingers just went to the same note. You know, I ended up playing the same notes I play on guitar. Like, it just doesn't, those sounds are just sort of in there, and they never really, I mean, I always think dissonance is a bad word for them, because to my ear, they're just sort of where they're what I want. I mean, 11s on a minor chord, or like 9, it just, or that sort of minor second thing.
That's what,
I mean, it's like, on organ, it's almost too much. I mean, I'll sit there and play a B3 and end up playing along with some record just for fun, and end up with the little cluster going and that Leslie turning and whatever overtones you have in the B3. I just won't move the thing for, like, you know, I mean, it's almost too much. It knocks it's intoxicating, the sound of those things beating against each other, you know, so I'm aware that I must really like it. But one of my favorite, this is great, one of my favorite things I ever saw on the internet, there was some comment, somebody saw this and then called me up, and then I read it. I guess it was about the title track of Time the Revelator, and the comment was like, was the engineer even listening to this? The guitars are so out of tune that, and I'm like, what do you mean our guitars are out of tune? I'm like, I remember we tune all the, I mean, those guitars aren't out of tune. They're pretty good tune. And then I realize that they just think that's out of tune. And I'm like, oh my God, I just thought that was pretty. You know, like, and it like blew my mind that someone listening to that heard me playing on that thing and just thought that my guitar was out of tune, and that's why it sounded like that.
I think for me, like Caleb Meyer, like the beginning of that, maybe it's because it was just the way that second record starts.
But
that's like a whole other sound.
You know, she wrote that on banjo.
Okay.
That song, and it had that ringing tone, because I think she was in Sawmill or whatever. I think she was in modal. And then she was going to play it on guitar because it didn't actually sound very good when we messed around with it on banjo. So she started playing, and I think, is she open? She's tuned.
Yeah.
Her B string is down to A.
Okay.
Right?
So she's
yeah, because that's...
okay.
So she was doing this.
Yeah.
And I was just aware that I wanted to take that 50 thing and go further out with it. You know, without pulling it like this.
Yeah.
Like the third pulls it back in.
Right.
You know, and I thought, oh, well, there's, what is that? That's an 11, I guess. You know, and I mean, I'm crazy about nines, and then that, yeah, so I think I was just trying to expand that chord outward. I wanted Revelator to start with a lick that you would know what song it was, but I didn't want it to be anything.
Right.
I wanted it to be very simple and bell-like. And so then I thought, which I just thought was relentless and annoying, but just also very wide.
Right.
And created atmosphere instantly. Because when you get... when you get from here to there...
Yeah.
That makes me very happy.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's, you've got your space. And I mean, I find it interesting how long, like once you have that space established, you know, you do have a fair amount of flexibility with what you can do before it goes away. Like I do like it that lingers a while. It gives you some time to, you know, mess around with some other stuff and maybe make a few mistakes and some wrong moves, as long as you sort of, you know, come back in a minute. And I like in that song the fact that Gil's little D chord turns into a 7,
Right.
but with no third on the 7th chord. But now you've got the third of the key
In there, yeah.
but it sounds like that. I mean, when I play well, I generally don't think about anything,
No.
you know, which I think is normal.
Yeah.
But I don't think about scales. I know some people do. I mean, like what I'm aware of is what I'm generally aware of what the notes I'm playing are relative to the chord that I'm playing over.
Right.
That's about where my mental, you know, if we're playing an A chord and I'm doing that, or wherever, where would I be? I'm lost. Yeah.
Right.
I would be aware that I was playing the 9 and the 3rd, and then I would be aware, depending on where we were going, if we were going to go up to an E minor chord, that I could get to the 7th there, and then get to the 5th, and then maybe throw the 9 underneath, or... Which is, you know, where I ended up playing an awful lot of things where there's other stuff, there's those other notes ringing. It's all kind of funny, because, yeah, when I learned all the parts on this, but so yeah, winter of 95, still playing the Taylor.
Yeah.
We go up to Boston, and we're in Concord, actually. We're in Concord at Earl's dad's house. and I think it was Bob Stanton's car, the country song, the country ensemble guy, the great Kelly Picker from Berkeley. We were painting his 1977 Olds 88. Or Earl was painting it, and we went over to help, to hang out. And it's one of these weird, like, the house is built up and the driveway sort of goes into the under the house, which is the basement, but also the garage. It's really cold. I remember we're in there, and I'm just wandering around, and over in the back on the workbench is all this crap, and I see a guitar shape. But the guitar is completely covered with sawdust and dirt, but mainly sawdust, because there's a big there's a saw right there, and the sawdust is like blown over it, and it's got like, in some cases, on the headstock it's like this thick, and then down here it's like, this thick. But I mean, it has to have been lying there for 4 or 5 years,
right?
And I can't remember. Earl would know when he'd gotten it. I think he'd had it for about 20 years.
Mm.
But somebody had got it at a yard sale and then sold it to him. The back was stripped, didn't have strings on it, didn't have a bridge on it, was covered with sawdust. Gil licked her finger and said, "Oh, it's an Epiphone." I picked it up, turned it over, went like this, and thought it had one of the nicest knocks I'd ever heard on a guitar, which was something I always...
Yeah.
I liked the sound of boxes. It sounded clear as a bell. I really liked it. And I walked out with it like this, and I said, "Earl, what do you need for this?" Because I had it in my head for some reason that I don't understand, that I thought a little archtop might be a cool thing to play. Yeah. I just had some thought about mid-range or something, and some thought about the way Gil played, and I thought, well, it'd be cool, but it wasn't a very focused thought.
It wasn't like, I got to get something other than
Oh,
this.
No. And Earl said, "I don't want to sell that." He doesn't want to sell it. But I'm desperate to get it, and I don't even know why. I really liked the shape of it, and I really liked the way it felt, even though it didn't have strings. I hadn't heard it, obviously. So Earl said, "Dave, listen, if you can get me a Bandmaster Reverb head, I'll trade you." Now, I've never seen a Bandmaster Reverb head. I've never even heard of one. This is like some amp they made, I think, in the late 60s or early 70s. It's silver face Fender thing. Yeah. But it's a head. I've never seen a bit. So I go in to Boston the next day, and I go to Alston Music, and there amongst the amps is a silver Bandmaster Reverb head. And I don't have any money at this point, because I never had any money. And it's like $200, and I maybe have $100.
Right.
20 or something like that. So I plug it in, and it works, but the reverb doesn't work. And I convinced the guy, I'm like, "Look, it's a Bandmaster Reverb, the reverb doesn't work, sell it to me for $120, whatever I got." And he did. So I take it back to Earl, who never thought I'd find one.
Right.
Because he'd been looking forever. Apparently he thought it was a great steel amp, and he's like, "What? You found?" Like, I found it the next day. And he felt bad that I had to spend $120, so he gave me like $60 back. So I ended up with like $60, and he gave me this guitar, which is great. So then I take it back to Nashville, no bridge, and again, for reasons I would love to know why I thought this, I had decided that because the body was so small and there was no space here, that what I needed was a one-piece ebony bridge that wasn't adjustable, without little wheels. And I took it to Corner Music. Joe Glazer was working there. And I said, or maybe Joe had moved out of there by then and I'd met him on some other thing, but I'd met Joe. I said, "This is what I want. I want a one-piece ebony bridge." And he said, "Oh, that's interesting. Okay." And he took the guitar, and I'm guessing he took the guitar in February.
Yeah.
When we got back to Nashville in March or something. Or maybe even January. Months roll around, the guitar's gone, I don't think of it, I've got other guitars. We get some other, Taylor or Martin, some old... Anyway, blah, 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 time passes. We're going out to make the first record. We've met with all the producers, we're going to work with T-Bone, we're working out in California. And I remember this guitar, I'm like, shit, I should get that thing done for the record. So truly, like, the day we're shipping guitars to Los Angeles, Joe finally gives me this thing back. There's one extra box. I wasn't going to bring it, but there was an extra box we'd gotten from Gru, and I'm like, okay, maybe. Well, maybe I'll ship this thing. So I find a case for it. Comes back from Joe. I string it up. I go, and I'm like, huh. It didn't sound like that. It used to sound much different. But it sounded clear, and I liked the way it rang, and I thought, okay, I'll take it. And then still, it was the last guitar we tried when we went in the studio with T-Bone that first couple days. And as soon as I heard it on mic, I was like, I'm done.
That's it, yeah.
Well, I actually tweaked something on the EQ, and then I was like, I'm like, that sounds really interesting and cool. And it's very funny to listen whenever, you know, I haven't heard Revival in a long time, but whenever I hear it, I hear myself like learning how to play this guitar and sort of adapting the parts.
Right.
Like adapting the sort of Taylor parts and being so stoked at how much I like the way this thing is sounding. Like there's a bunch of weird little things in the solos that I know are just like weird blissy.
Yeah.
Like just it was nice. I'm very happy because those first few days of recording Revival where we did all the duet stuff, it was just it was so nice to be playing this guitar and to be loving the way it sounded.